जितने journalists थे, we were all standing outside this very high barricaded Palam technical security area. Then there was a Khatara white Maruti van. मैं उस van के अंदर घुस गई. And I hid at the back of that van.
Among the sandwiches?
Among the sandwiches, and in that confusion somehow I got in. I don't know
you
how.
You got inside the gate of the Palam technical area?
Yes. And I went there and Jaswant Singh was going to the steps as I was going to the steps. And he knew me, of course, and he said, Barkha, in his baritone, what are you doing here? Al-Qaeda has done horrific things, but this was a Pakistan ISI plot. The singular aim of the hijacking was to get Masood Azhar back so that Jaish-e-Mohammed could then inflict the kind of wounds it has on India since then.
Namaskar. The last few days of the 20th century were extremely tough for Atal Bihari Vajpayee Government and India. At around 4 p.m. on the 24th of December 1999, an Indian Airlines Flight IC814 took off from Kathmandu. It was hijacked. The 2-hour flight lasted 8 days. At the end of the millennium, 3 dreaded terrorists were released. And that incident is back in form of a Netflix series, IC814. Now, there are questions being raised. The series is being defended over one element, that is the translation of facts to entertainment. With me today is somebody who was not on that plane, was not part of those Sarkari discussions which took place to decide or not decide things, but somebody who was keeping an eye on all that. My old colleague, my CV is very long because I'm very old. Her CV is long because of her achievements. I have with me the head of Mojo's Story, extremely decorated, awarded program, Barkha Dutt. Pleasure to have you, Barkha. After a very long time, we are sitting together.
It's so good to see you, Rahul. Old colleague, old friend. Very good to be with you again.
IC814, Barkha. You were in office?
Of course.
The day it happened, 24 December?
Yes.
It happened around 4 o'clock, so you must have been preparing for your show.
Absolutely. And some memories are hazy because there was so much chaos. I think what I remember when I shut my eyes and I think back to that time is just the chaos. See, we have to remember what year this was. This was 1999. It was the year of the Kargil war between India and Pakistan, a war I covered from the front line. It is the year in which 3 months later, Nawaz Sharif gets removed as Prime Minister of Pakistan. Musharraf takes over, sends Nawaz Sharif
And the circumstances in which that happened.
And the circumstances in which that happened. And right after that comes this hijacking. But the way we are able to remember it आज बहुत clearly, इस तरह से नहीं communication हो रही थी. I think you would remember because you were covering that beat that Vajpayee ji, who was the Prime Minister, शायद उनको भी बहुत थोड़ी देर से ही पता लगा कि क्या हो रहा है.
You see, if I recall, the plane took off at 4:05, and it was somewhere over Varanasi that it was conveyed that the plane is likely to be taken to Lahore, and it has been hijacked. I was posted in Lucknow, just reached Lucknow for my posting, and I had rushed to the Lucknow airport where I came to know that it is not coming to Lucknow, but it is going towards Delhi, and they may need fuel. So it may go to Lahore. And after that, it was absolute chaos. The interesting element which I remember was, if you also remember, Atal Bihari Vajpayee was mid-air when the incident happened. And Vajpayee didn't know about the incident for almost 1 hour after it had happened.
Yeah. And when we look back at it, 2 things really stay with you, right? We have to remember that in 1999, we didn't have digital media. We had newspapers and we had a couple of TV channels, right? We didn't have the sort of scale of
scramble and
the scramble, the chaos, and therefore the pressure on the government of the day to communicate lucidly was not as much as it would be today. That pressure to communicate, especially in real time. There was no social media speculating or following flight radar and trying to map the journey of the plane yourself. ये सब कुछ नहीं था. तो हम लोग, आप और मैं, we were dependent on what someone in government, someone in RAW, sources, someone in IB would tell us. And I think the entire establishment was caught unawares, right? Even though there are now some accounts that suggest that in Kathmandu, जहाँ से ये plane hijack होता है, a junior officer of the RAW does inform his senior in the embassy that there is chatter about a possible hijack. That chatter is ignored, that assessment is not taken seriously, and the plane gets hijacked. And after that,
And he was a very well-connected
the junior officer who told his
officer who was on board, you're talking about.
No, so there are two things. There is a RAW officer who is on the plane, जो उस समय रिवील नहीं हुआ, जिसको कहा जाता है ghost passenger. What do we mean by ghost passenger? The government released the manifest कि कौन है उस plane में. One name was not revealed, and that name was Mr. Tomar's name. I can take his name now because it's in public domain. Mr. Tomar was a RAW officer, very connected RAW officer, whose brother-in-laws, one of them was in the Prime Minister's office at that time, and another one had headed the NSG. Right? Nikhil Kumar and NKC.
Commissioner of Delhi.
Correct. He was related to both of them by marriage. He was a senior RAW officer and he was on the plane, I think, in seat 16C, if I'm not wrong. लेकिन ये सब तो उस समय हमें मालूम ही नहीं था. ये तो
So the first instinct what was
पता
happened when the news broke, what did you do? Hit the news floor with a mic to talk about it,
I
or
think hit the phone first. Hit the phone to say क्या हो क्या रहा है, because as I said, there was just chaos. In parallel, I think family members, what I do remember is, and it was a very difficult choice for the media to make at that time, because family members who got word कि हमारे plane hijack हो गया, the people we love are on this plane, they started reaching out to us. And if you remember, at some point, the protests became televised because the protests were right outside the Prime Minister's office. Right? Not office, residence.
In fact, I recall there were you also covering
Yeah.
where the protesting family members invaded the meetings.
And one of the things we were criticized for that time, I don't think the criticism is fair, but one of the things we were criticized for was that the country watching the sight of these desperate protesting families really put pressure on the government to take the decision in a certain way, right?
Increase the pressure.
But the point is, in my opinion, we cannot be held responsible for the families would have protested anyway. It's our job to tell the story of what we're seeing. That was one element of what we were seeing. But yes, certainly it was a challenge for the media that how do you, because we didn't know everything ना, हमें कौन बता रहा था कि negotiations के बारे में कोई सरकार सोच रही है, नहीं सोच रही. The first critical point that unfolds in this, which we all know now, is when Captain Devi Sharan manages to land the plane in Amritsar, right?
That was sometime around 8 o'clock in the night.
Yeah, Amritsar, the plane is there. And it is there for between 50 or 55 minutes. It is on the ground in Indian territory, right? This is the one mauka that we have as a country to stop this plane from leaving Indian territory. अब इसके बारे में मैं इतने अलग-अलग वर्जन सुन चुकी हूँ that it's difficult to know what to believe. But
I'll halt you here.
हाँ.
Did you, at the time when the news came, between that time until the time there was some kind of plausible action by the government?
Yes.
Did you get the feeling that the government perhaps was fumbling terribly at that time? The crisis management group did not meet, the IB director did not know. Did you feel that at that time it was perhaps an inexperienced government?
I mean, firstly, I was a very young reporter. So, the people one got to know over the years, it's not like one could call the IB chief at that time or one could call, जिनको जानते थे उनको phone किया. But certainly the sense was a lack of clarity, a lack of direction, a lack of a plan for such a moment. Nobody had kind of gamed this moment out, right? कि अगर ऐसा हो तो हमें क्या करना चाहिए. And even now, so many years later, if you connect this impression that I had of a kind of paralysis,
in the government.
a kind of panic and a kind of paralysis, or a just shock. When there's extreme shock, even an individual human being, that's why they sometimes show that you have to shake a person who's in shock because they get paralyzed. There was a kind of panicked paralysis. That is my overwhelming.
Were you speaking to these, did you get to speak to Jaswant Singh or somebody during that period?
Much later.
Much
And I'll
later.
tell you how I spoke to Jaswant Singh. It now seems like an almost funny story. But at that time, I was just trying to get the news, speaking to the relatives, trying to get the news in my show. And I was on the India-Pakistan beat. So I understood what was at stake here, right? I understood how serious this was. I understood that this was in some ways the unfinished agenda of Kargil. What was playing out, we keep forgetting that Kargil had happened just 6 months ago.
You're trying to say that it was the sense of shame and ignominy that Pakistan inherited from Kargil, that they were actually retaliating.
Yes, I believe that. I believe that because Kargil proved to be such a big embarrassment for Pervez Musharraf, the fact that after the Indian military was able to create a military battleground victory and enable the conditions for Bill Clinton to tell Nawaz Sharif कि आपके जितने लोग हैं उनको बोलिए वापस जाएं. So they literally, had to retreat.
Is very embarrassing.
They retreated. Then there were soldiers of Pakistan who had fought this, who had been sent into Indian territory.
And their bodies
were not taken back by Pakistan. Their bodies, the last rites were performed by the Indian army in many cases. And I believe that once Musharraf took over, Musharraf had taken over officially by then. He was no longer just the army chief, he was the president of the country, Nawaz Sharif was out. I believe that Pakistan, Musharraf...
No, but you followed Kargil very well.
I believe कि जो कारगिल में नहीं हो पाया, जो embarrassment हुई, उसकी extension was being played out here. So I was kind of following it through that prism. But I want to connect this to Amritsar, this sense of paralysis. 55, I know it's not, पहले मुझे कहना चाहिए that I don't have any easy, I understand that it was a very difficult situation for any government. Because on the one hand, you have the safety of your passengers, your own people. On the other hand, you are being asked to release dreaded terrorists. Not an easy situation for any government. Any decision you make can be a bad decision. And any decision you make will have a downside.
In fact, till Amritsar, there was no demand made.
Till Amritsar, there was no demand made. You just knew there was a hijacked plane, but you knew that there was a threat of killing people. Okay? So, I'm just saying it's not an easy situation. But yes, obviously, there was no crisis planned for such a situation. What do you do? Who takes the decision? What is your official position? What is your covert position? These things were not...
In fact, Brijesh Mishra, who was one of the key players, and I think a lot was his responsibility, he was NSA at that time, told Shekhar Gupta later, much later, in 2003 or something, that the instruction from Delhi was to stop the plane in Amritsar.
Yes.
But that's saying nothing. Plane is not like a motorcycle that you can stop. There are 179, 80 odd people on the aircraft.
See, I tried to ask A.S. Dullat, who was the RANW chief and a member of all the crisis management groups at that time. I said, whose decision was it to not send commandos to stop the plane in Amritsar? He says, no decision was... I said, was the decision not taken or was the proposal opposed? He said, there was no proposal. But the Punjab police was ready. The Punjab police and the former Punjab DGP, I think Sarabjit Singh, he's on record to say कि हमारे commandos थे. But we needed
In fact, interestingly, his IG of Amritsar was on leave.
Yes.
And interestingly, he had to send somebody else there. But there is one very interesting thing that what Mr. Dullat says, that the NSG team actually, the plane left in 1955, and the NSG team reached Amritsar at 2015. They had problems getting an aircraft in Delhi to rush to Amritsar.
Sounds familiar, no? It happened in 2611 also, if you remember. But ये तो बहुत पहले की बात है. But, okay, leave NSG. The Punjab police commandos were ready. They were ready. Secondly, you could have kept, जिसको कहते हैं ना, Bowser. You could have obstructed the path of the plane physically. And now we know, Dullat confirms this, that NTB type commando operations were being discussed. इसको storm करे, नहीं करे. किसी ने फैसला नहीं लिया. Now in their defense, they say, or at least Mr. Dullat says on record, that the fear was that if we storm the plane and try and stop it by force, not just could passengers have died, been killed, the pilot could have been killed. And I can understand that thought process. But that is different from saying that we weren't able to take a decision. And that is why I feel that it's not as if someone with a clear brain said, all right, we have no choice but to allow the plane to leave Amritsar, we will have to negotiate. It was a kind of, what do we do? Every choice is a bad choice, potentially. And so the plane leaves. Once the plane leaves Amritsar, I think the
game was over.
The script writes itself.
In fact, Devi, the captain of the plane, in fact, told the ATC at the time of leaving Amritsar, taking off, that we all are dying.
So one account that I have heard is that the hijackers threatened to kill a passenger every 10 minutes. Rupin Katyal was killed.
Satnam Singh
was injured and Rupin Katyal was killed. And one account I've also heard is that till Lahore, Rupin Katyal was possibly alive. And if the Pakistanis had helped and even allowed him to get off the plane and given him treatment, he may have been alive today. He had been married for only 20 days. His wife didn't even know he'd been
21
killed.
days, yeah.
21 days, yeah. So, furthering my theory that this is the unfinished work of God.
You see, what you say is very right, because the first reaction of the Pakistanis was to shut down the lights. They shut the lights and the instrument landing systems so that the plane does not land. Eventually, at around 8 o'clock in the night or 8:15, they allowed the aircraft to land. Jeep, in fact, there is another interesting element which comes in here, that Jeep Sarthi was asked by the Indian government to ask the Pakistanis to send him to Lahore from Islamabad. Now, what is interesting is that from the beginning they knew that the destination is Lahore. The Indian High Commissioner stayed put in Islamabad till the plane landed in Lahore. That was another degree of unpreparedness. At that time, it was also said in Lahore, what you're saying is right, that the Pakistanis refused to take hostages there. They said, we will not let that
They
happen.
didn't let anyone disembark, right? They
Were
could
you talking to some sources in Pakistan also?
I must have been. It's been many years. I'm sure I was working every single phone line I had, and trying to find out. But of course, no Pakistan official. I was probably channeling Pakistani journalists, friends in the community there, because no one in Pakistan government wanted to own up any connection or any link to this, and they wanted to create this one-arm distance and almost present. I think they were just keen to get the plane off their territory as soon as possible. That is the impression I had.
Then, after all the agreement happened,
No, usse pehle. Now you cut to the plane has left. And now the government of India has no choice but to send a team of negotiators. And at the cabinet meeting, the IB and the raw chiefs are asked to send their best men. And, they do send they send a top-class team. Ajit Doval, C.D. Sahai,
Kaju.
Vivek Karju from the MEA, Anand Arni from the RANW. These are among the negotiators. And from Islamabad goes Mr. Ghanshyam, who is the husband of Ruchi Ghanshyam, who's now we know as an ambassador. But she was posted in Islamabad. In fact, she's just out with a book called A Woman in Islamabad, and riveting chapter on IC814. Mr. Ghanshyam is the first Indian official to reach Kandahar and come face to face with the Taliban. The Taliban, India has no official relationship with.
Yeah, in fact, we had refused to recognize them.
We have refused to recognize them. And one of the things, I haven't seen the series, but one of the things that Netflix series has been criticized for, if you've seen, correct me if I'm getting this right, but I've read that there is a suggestion that Afghanistan also has a very active hand in this hijacking. Whereas, this much I can say with certainty, that this was entirely a Pakistan plot. And the singular aim of it, one was to try and extend the sort of disruption that Kargil sought to do and failed, but two was to get a man called Masood Azhar released from a Jammu jail.
I'll come to that later, to the serial later. Then I want to knit the events. Then comes the fact that 3 terrorists have to be released.
उससे पहले बहुत कुछ होता है. उससे पहले हाईजैकर्स की डिमांड है कि आप 36 रिलीज करिए और $200 million आप दीजिए. Now, all accounts have been categorical that no money changed hands. But that was the demand. Vivek Karju was trying to say that, all right, they finally whittled down the demand to 3 or 5, but they said, we will choose who we will release. Vivek Karju said. The hijackers didn't accept that. They were very clear that these were the 3 men. Masood Azhar, Jaish-e-Mohammed chief, Omar Sheikh, who goes on to kill Daniel Pearl, and Mushtaq Zargar, who is a homegrown Indian Kashmiri terrorist, amongst the most dreaded. These are the 3 men. They're clear कि इसके बिना तो हम जाएंगे नहीं, ना कोई release होगा. Finally, this demand is accepted. At the cabinet meeting, there are differences. At the CCS. Mr. Advani is not in favor. And Farooq Abdullah threatens to resign. Now,
Yes, when Dullat apparently called him up to release the 3, it was Farooq Abdullah. And since there are going to be elections,
this is important thing to talk
this is a very important
about.
thing that Farooq Abdullah may be called anything. But at that time, did you get to speak to him?
I did. And I'll tell you the story.
And he apparently warned them that it will have very serious consequences.
He warned them. He said, I mark my words. I remember what Farooq Abdullah said, and I spoke to him directly at that time because I used to cover Kashmir a lot. And he said, mark my words, you will regret this. So Dullat is sent from Delhi to convince him. Dullat goes to his house. And Dullat confirms this. Farooq shouts at him and says, I am not
at his
favor.
house.
At his own house in Srinagar. Farooq Abdullah then picks up the phone and calls both Jaswant Singh and LK Advani and bangs the phone down. And is highly angry. Drives to the governor, who is Girish Saxena. Says, I will not allow this. Girish Saxena then apparently prevails on him. He tells Dullat that you have done this once before. He's talking about the Rubaiya Saeed kidnapping, which is Mehbooba Mufti's sister. There too, to get her safety, 5 militants were released. Dullat tells him that I have come not as today, then I was posted here. Now I have come on behalf of the government of India. You have an objection, you take it up with him. That's when he calls LK Advani Jaswant Singh. Advani expresses helplessness. Advani and Farooq Abdullah on the same wavelength, ki ye mat karo. They're not inclined. But Vajpayee has, I think, at that time decided that we have no option because...
Was it Jaswant Singh prevailing on him?
It's hard to say because I think that the government felt that if the only priority is to get the passengers back home. And once that became the priority, everything worked backwards from there. There's another historical context that's important to remember, which is that India had just conducted nuclear tests. We were not... So Jaswant Singh dials countries across the world and doesn't get a lot of support at that time because we were being penalized in some ways for these nuclear things. He calls Strobe Talbot. He wants the Americans to intervene.
That's why perhaps in this hijack drama, even America didn't help us.
That's the point. Now, if the world isn't helping you, America isn't stepping in.
The Gulf countries shut their...
Dubai, 28 passengers, I think, 26 are able to get off. Now, what does the government do? The government says, we've got to get these passengers home. Their relatives are protesting outside the Prime Minister's residence, I think, Teen Murti. And I don't know who prevails on whom, but at the CCS, Jaswant Singh, it is then decided we have to accept these demands. Dullat's memoirs tell a story of Ajit Doval calling Dullat on the 30th. The critical call was the 30th. And Doval says to Dullat in the account that Dullat gives in his book कि जल्दी करवा दीजिए फैसला. यहाँ पता नहीं क्या होने वाला है. In other words, the negotiating team doesn't trust their own lives to be safe. They're in a hostile country. There's Taliban, with whom we have no official relationship. There's Pakistan reading the terms.
Means the country in which you are in, you don't have people who are accountable for what happens.
Nothing. And the hijackers keep taking their every time there's a round of negotiations, the hijackers say, we'll get back to you. They're obviously calling their bosses in Pakistan, their masters in Pakistan, and then coming back. So this is what Dullat writes.
What was also very interesting was that in that phase they were talking, this terrorist for 10 passengers.
Yeah.
This one for 5.
Yeah. And so,
and
just imagine, like, now that the passengers in the plane, the bathrooms are clogged. You have accounts of passengers who were not having water, so they did not have to use the bathroom. There's the stench of a body that's just lying there.
Proselytization.
Yes. And the chief of cabin crew, Anil Sharma, he had to lift the body, and he says that the hijackers threatened to almost kill him because they said, "Aap, बहुत smart बन रहे हैं, आप चुप होके बैठिए वहाँ पे." And in the meantime, the ghost passenger, Mr. Tomar, we now know, is just sitting quietly because, God forbid, the hijackers had got to know that an intelligence official of India was on board that plane. Can you imagine what would have happened? So therefore, his identity was never revealed to come back.
But it is a fact that it was Mr. Tomar who was told that there is a possibility of a hijack. That's also on record.
That is in R.K. Yadav's book. Yes. R.K. Yadav is his name? R.K. Yadav's book, yes. So I don't know that independently, but I've read it in R.K. Yadav's book. I did ask Mr. Dutt, and he said it's not true. If Mr. Tomar was aware of a hijack alert, why would he take that plane?
He took it lightly.
So there was an appraisal.
We have a history of doing that. Yani, going by the precedents and our past dealing with these things.
So we will know.
In Bombay, there were alerts when.
So I think the challenge of good intelligence is which thread do you take seriously.
So then this CCS meeting agreed that they will.
No, so Dutt has gone to Farooq.
So Farooq Abdullah, what did he do eventually?
So Farooq Abdullah was persuaded in whatever way he was, and then Dutt has to bring the terrorists back to Delhi, to the airport. Dutt is sent.
Why were they brought back to Delhi?
Straight to the airport where Jaswant Singh had decided to go to Kandahar.
But that was again a controversial decision.
Very controversial. Now, today we look at it as, what are the optics of India's foreign minister traveling with 3 terrorists. But I think the thinking was, to be fair to Jaswant Singh, who's not alive and here to tell his own story today, to be fair to Jaswant Singh, I think he thought that he should be there to receive the passengers. I believe the mistake was to travel in the same aircraft as the terrorists. I think there should have been...
How did that happen, Barkha?
Because,
see, the government, Advani, Dutt, everybody was against it. And it was apparently...
Jaswant Singh volunteered.
Volunteered, but Advani, the Deputy Prime Minister, said no. But do you think it was that moment where Jaswant Singh wanted to be a people's leader? He said that somebody senior has to be there, although it had huge amount of risk. If the Foreign Minister of India is trapped in a foreign land, hostile region, with no accountability, it was not a good idea.
I think Jaswant Singh was trying to be the man who was there to receive the people as
Fauji,
they came out.
That little...
But I think what was very wrong was to be on the same aircraft as these 3 released hostages, because you're diminishing the Indian state. I understand that hostage swaps happen, terrorists are released. Like, it happens the world over. Sometimes countries and governments have no option. But for Jaswant Singh to be on that plane with Masood Azhar...
It has not left them till date. It's there. Every time they talk muscular on terror, they are told, your foreign minister travelled with the terrorists to hand them over.
Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, you don't know that another government in their place won't have done the same. It points more to preparedness, lack of preparedness, how you're supposed to respond in these situations. But I do believe that Jaswant Singh should not have gone on that plane with Masood Azhar.
I would like to tell the viewers here that I will take a break from memories of the political kinds. I would like to know what Barkha did on that day. The way she tried to force herself to get onto that plane in which Jaswant Singh and the terrorists were going.
Yes. Yes. So I don't think Jaswant Singh...
How old were you then?
I was 27.
27-year-old. And she tried to get inside
I just turned 27 in December.
In which a foreign minister of a country was escorting 3 dreaded terrorists to a very hostile land called Afghanistan, where the Taliban was ruling.
Yes.
Please tell me what happened.
So while I think Jaswant...
What time was it?
It was the middle of the day. I remember that. Morning, first half of the day. And we were all reporting outside the Palam technical area, the high security area, because by now...
You were told that they are coming here.
By now we knew. I don't know how we knew. We knew that these terrorists are being released and Jaswant Singh is going.
Yeah.
So, jitne journalists the, we were all standing outside this very high barricaded Palam technical security area. And while I think Jaswant Singh should not have been on that plane, I really wanted to be on that plane as a journalist. I wanted to be there, you know. So I was like, I tried persuasion, let me go in, let me... So only security guards at the gate, who else could I try? I called any official, anyone, the PMO, nobody took my phone call, obviously. Then there was a Khatara white Maruti van. Every vehicle that was going inside had to stop to be checked. While it was being checked, पीछे उसकी डिक्की खोली, उसमें डब्बे थे, कार्डबोर्ड के डब्बे, सैंडविचेस, the sandwiches that were going with the Indian delegation to Kandahar. I jumped into the van.
That much
हाँ,
care
उतना
was taken.
ऑर्गेनाइजेशन था कि सैंडविच के डब्बे थे,
यानी इतने
किसी
बड़े
ने-
उसमें सैंडविचेस का
थे।
एक मारुति
हाँ,
खटारा में जा रहा था।
हाँ, वो अंदर कोई डिलीवरी देने आया था, मैं उस वैन के अंदर घुस गई, and I hid at the back of that van.
Among the sandwiches.
Among the
डब्बास.
sandwiches, and in that confusion somehow I got in. I don't know
You
how.
got inside the gate of the Palam technical area.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
More as a contraband.
I,
And cameraman?
I think Jami got in with me, but that part, no, I think Jami was not able to get in.
Ajmal Jami was
Yeah.
one of the cameramen in NDTV with us.
Yeah. Superb cameraman, who did some of the
cameraman.
toughest assignments
He was
for all of us.
He was in fact my first cameraman in television,
Yes.
1988, 89.
So I have to call Jami to ask if he got in with me, but I think he did not, because that would have drawn too much attention.
Yeah.
I think
And a
I
camera,
managed-
because those cameras were very big.
Camera
They were not these little toys which we carry
13
nowadays.
किलो के 13 kilos your camera
Yes.
used to weigh, तो मैं तो घुस
Those
गई.
beta cameras were huge.
So मैं घुस, अच्छा, please also remember there were no mobile phones. Mobile phones had just started
Were
coming.
you using the wireless? No, those
Recorder?
wireless had come in.
कौन सा वाला?
And the pagers.
हाँ, pager
Pagers
था.
and wireless
Pager
were there.
था, पर ये
Some-
कोई
we
mobile
as-
phone, ये
Some
सब-
channel we were using wireless.
But it
also.
was not like you could go with your phone and take
yeah,
pictures.
You can't. You can't.
I got in and I was on the tarmac. It was the most surreal experience.
So where were you? Where did you reach? You reached the tarmac where the plane was about to land.
Because the van stopped, some driver from the van went inside into some room. And I could see the plane that was going, so I just walked till the tarmac. And I think everybody was too flabbergasted
That
to see me.
aircraft was already here.
The aircraft that was going to take Jaswant Singh
Was already there.
was on the tarmac. Was on the tarmac. It was another Indian Airlines plane. It was on the tarmac. And I went there, and Jaswant Singh was going to the steps as I was going to the steps. And he knew me, of course, and he said, "Barkha," in his baritone, "what are you doing here?" Now, in the meantime, my rival channel, which was India Today, Aaj Tak, I think Deepak Chaurasia was outside or somebody else was outside, and they were really angry कि ये कैसे घुस गए अंदर?
Oh, so they had seen yourself
They
getting smuggled.
figured it out. I think
Oh, you had disappeared.
I vanished.
Yes, that's what a SOP is, that you always keep an eye on what the rider
Correct.
is doing.
So I vanished and they were like, "Ye kahan gayi?" And they figured out I've somehow managed to go inside. And they called Brajesh Mishra and complained about me. So by that time, Brajesh Mishra also said, "Ye ghus gayi andar ladki." And in the meantime, Jaswant Singh, of course, I said, "Sir, I will do anything. Please take me." There was no cameraman. Now I remember, it's a very clear memory. I'm literally pleading with Jaswant Singh to take me with him to Kandahar.
This is happening on the
On the
stairs.
tarmac.
On the
Just as
tarmac.
he's standing at the steps, I'm standing at the steps with him. And he says, "I'm very sorry and you have to go back." And so, tail between my legs, I went back outside.
You went back or you stood there and see it go?
No,
The
I
plane?
was then shunted out.
Shooed out.
I was shooed out, but I didn't catch a glimpse. I
So
tried
who
to-
all did you see going up? Just one Singh?
I saw just one Singh.
He must have been the last because he was a foreign minister.
Yeah, so everybody else may have been already on the plane because these boxes were just being brought in to be loaded or whatever in some, in cargo hold or whatever.
Describe me the scene, this aircraft. Could you see anything? People?
Nothing. There was just one thing getting into the plane, this plane on kind of empty tarmac, and officials scurrying about whom I didn't recognize. The negotiators were already there. So none of the recognizable people were there, right? The terrorists I asked Mr. Dutt, I said, when you brought the terrorists from the jail, did you meet them? He said, no. We didn't come face to face with them. I think SP Ved, if I'm not wrong, SP Ved is
Escorted one of them.
Yeah. And so then they were all put into some common place and taken straight to this aircraft from Jammu. Two of them were from
Masood
Jammu.
Azhar,
Umar Sheikh.
Zargar and Sheikh.
Yeah,
Zargar
I
and
think Sheikh may have been in Tihar. One of them was not in Jammu. Two of them were in
Yeah,
Jammu.
yeah.
And so, so this is how it happens. And then, well.
So
the
then
rest
what
we know.
happened? You were shooed out.
I was shooed out.
You came back to that vantage position where
And
all
started
journalists were.
reporting, saying I
तो फिर
tried to
उन्होंने
go
बाकी
in.
लोगों ने क्या बोला आपको?
I mean, they looked very relieved that I hadn't managed to get a spot on the plane to go to Kandahar. You know how it is.
But you had that little nugget that you actually saw the plane.
I did. I had that nugget and
Were you taken off in a vehicle, sent out in a vehicle, or you walked out?
Vehicle. To
Vehicle.
make sure that I don't do any
You
more
don't wander
mischief.
away.
Yeah. And the thing is that I did what I could to try, and I also thought even if I don't get on the plane, I'll get to talk to Jaswant Singh. He'll say something to me, but he didn't say anything to me. I thought something, I'll get to know what's happening. And
Was he looking flustered?
he was looking very somber. He was looking sad and somber. That is how I would remember him. And, I asked Mr. Dullat, now such as it is, that did LK Advani put on what did he say? So he said very non-verbally expressed his disagreement.
What does that mean?
Remember Advani?
That rub of hands.
That rub of hands.
But that's always happening.
So I don't know.
And it depends on you whether you interpret it as a yes or no.
So Advani has to tell his own account, which I think has not been chronicled, about how much he opposed. We don't have that story from Mr. Advani. He's chosen to not share that story, right? But we do have Farooq's story very clearly. Farooq's story is a very detailed story that Farooq slams the phone on Jaswant and Advani and says, do not release these men. It will come back to bite you.
Then that entire drama which took place at the tarmac, the exchange, how did you report that? For a lot of young journalists, it might be a good lesson how to know how, when you are trying to find out information from such distant land about some activities and events which are shrouded in secrecy.
Yeah.
Which eventually nobody will like to talk about in future.
Yeah. So look, there's also a national security dimension here, right? There are things that you don't say even if you know them. But the point is that no government, I think, has fully internalized this lesson, unfortunately, is that mostly if you take the media into confidence and you communicate clearly and you say this is off limits, you can't report this, nobody will report it. But as we have seen, whether it is IC814 or later 2611, governments are very inept at communication, crisis communication, very inept. And you can see one is a BJP government, one is a Congress government, both highly inept at crisis communication, right? At that time, it was very important, which we had learnt in Kargil. In Kargil, one of the things that the government did very well was to have daily briefings, if you remember. Every day there was a press conference to say, this is what's happening. And nobody steered away from that press conference.
Since we don't do things openly, we don't introspect.
It creates rumors and fake news.
No, not only that, it does not create good chronicled lessons for the future.
Yes.
Now, if the government at that time had opened up, done a proper inquiry, I think in the later incidents, there would have been at least some kind of a blue book on how to go up.
Let's take this fight over the identities of the hijackers. One of the reasons that Netflix content head was summoned was because, you have presented them as if they were not Pakistani, you have presented them as if they were Hindus, not Muslim jihadists from Pakistan. Actually, if you go back to a press release of the time from the Ministry of Home Affairs,
even External Affairs,
and External Affairs, the identities are given. But because they're given in this press release format, imagine now if you were having hourly briefings or 2-hourly briefings or daily briefings and you had said, and there was a video available where this footage, I think they would have been pressured even on the Netflix series that has intercut between real footage, some real footage, to maybe use it, but that record of clear communication, at least I don't remember it. I don't remember, do you remember it? Someone coming out and saying, these are the hijackers, this is what...
See, I know, but I remember one very interesting thing that, in fact, till a very long time, 3-4 days, they didn't know the real names.
Yeah, correct.
It was basically a tip-off in Bombay where a crime branch team eventually cracked the case.
That's right.
And that's how they came to know the names of these people. So in the first 4 days, they had no clue.
But eventually it is released in a press statement.
Going back to that point, that the manner in which Pakistan behaved and the Taliban, they actually allowed them to go to the border, and after that, no punishment to those people, no trials. That proves the ISI Pakistani hand, the unfinished Kargil agenda, which you talk about. What I want to ask you here, I want to come back to this series. First, was it a very tough choice for a government even tomorrow if it happens?
I think so.
That 170-80 odd people.
Yeah, it's very tough.
You spoke to so many of them.
It's very...
Was anyone ready to say that no, nation first, a tough stand first?
It's easy to, with no disrespect to the trauma that people went through.
People went through, yes.
I did meet 1 or 2 people who said, they should have just stormed the plane. Nobody said, they should have just killed us. People did say, Why didn't they storm the plane in Amritsar?
They did say that?
Yes. But, even I asked that question. But having said that, what if in that storming lives had been lost? Today we would have been sitting
No,
discussing...
they had grenades. They could have blown the place.
Okay, this is another curious thing. Mr. Dullat on record to me has said that there is a lack of clarity. Everybody assumed that the hijackers were armed, but nobody knew for sure. How can this be? How can this be?
See, but I'll tell you a very interesting story. 3 days after this incident happened, this hijacking happened, while the plane was on the Kandahar tarmac, I wanted to prove that how it's easy to go to Nepal and actually hijack a plane. So there is at the Gorakhpur side, from the Gorakhpur side, there is an airport called Bhairava, which actually was the point where once the IC814 crossed Bhairava, then they declared the hijack. Then they hijacked the plane. They came into Indian territory. I actually entered with a large camera in a bag through the boundary wall, and I climbed inside an aircraft in Bhairava.
Wow.
And the beauty of it is that if you climb a plane in Bhairava, you are transferred from an aircraft to another aircraft. You're not sent through security. So it's that easy.
And probably like that even today.
No, things have improved after that. Things have improved after that. They have put in metal detectors. They are doing better. In fact, airport security went to CISF right after this. That was one of the results of this. But do you see a Modi regime may act differently if something like this happens? Or it is difficult for any government?
I think the Modi regime would want to act differently, because one of their very clear positions is that we've drawn new red lines. But it's easier said than done if you are actually in that situation. And I hope nobody is ever in that situation again. But imagine if for some reason... See, there's no foolproof guarantee against terrorism. No matter how much you may prepare, you're never going to be at that point.
No, they have the surprise element with them.
Yeah, and we have Pathankot, for example. It's not the same, but you have Pulwama, you have Pathankot, you have Uri.
What's happening in Jammu?
What's happening in Jammu right now? Now, imagine, God forbid, if you were to hypothesize that in one of these ambushes, your soldiers were taken hostage. Right now, I hope it never happens, or civilians were taken hostage. I think one of the things that IC814 teaches us, that while it is easy to say we do not negotiate with terrorists, every country in the world at some point has negotiated with terrorists, right? And I think that it is very easy to look at things in black and white or make it about your political positions. But when you're actually in that situation, no government can afford the mass killing of civilians in public knowledge, with public knowledge. No government.
You can't politically survive it.
You can't survive it, and somewhere basic humanism takes over. The public doesn't have the capacity to accept such a thing, right? We still are able to accept our soldiers go to war, they go to war, they come back in, sometimes they come back in coffins, unfortunately. But unarmed civilians, I don't think any
I'll come to the movie now.
I haven't seen it, so...
No, this series now.
Yeah, but I haven't seen
but
it. But
hypothetically.
Yes.
Do you think you should take a real-life event which has had a very serious consequence, which is of great significance in a nation's history?
Yeah.
It's not... IC814 was not ordinary event.
Yeah.
Take a real-life event, get a real-life name, and then... you don't put real life names.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
It's a very interesting question. And while I'm not a fan of creators being summoned by governments and being told, aise karo, waise karo, I do believe that there is an entire generation, and I work with some of them, I'm sure you do too. If you ask them, what is IC814? They will not know.
But if this becomes the benchmark?
And that is a problem for me. I've not seen the series, but I believe that there are two problems here. One is...
these young people who were born in the last 10 years, if their memory is populated about IC814 by this...
That is a problem. But that failure is not necessarily that of the movie maker. That failure is the failure to memorialize this event. and to like a lot, like, why is it? This is what I've been thinking about since I've been, since this controversy has erupted. Why do we know so little about IC814 in public conversation? We do talk about Kargil. We still talk about Kargil. We still talk about Vikram Batra. We still talk about the heroism of Kargil. How many people know Devi Sharan? How many people know about the team of negotiators that went from India to secure the freedom of all these passengers on board? How many people know where Rupin Katyal's wife is today, the one passenger who was killed? Why every December do we not memorialize? Because it embarrasses us that we had to release these 3 terrorists, but that doesn't undermine the trauma of what the passengers went to, and it doesn't take away the historical value of our people needing to know that this happened. Now, if we don't know, an entire generation is only going to get its knowledge from a fictionalized account.
See, also
There's a problem there.
What I find, and I read what Veer Sanghvi wrote,
Yeah.
and I totally agree with it, that the whole diversion. See, you can make a movie, real events, real names. You may omit a few names because eventually they were going around with the name Bhola and Shankar. Then there were those bosses who were sitting in the executive class, red cap and the other.
I totally support. I was shocked actually to hear. So there are two
Like
views on
you
this.
have said, that it was basically Pakistan all the way.
100%.
And it was not the Taliban at all.
100%
Whereas
Pakistan.
this eventual impression from this series which you get is that it was an Al-Qaeda handiwork, and it was, Pakistan has been kind of, conveniently sidestepped.
So I haven't seen the series, but if that's what the series conveys, and there are 2 sets of feedback. One is Veer's, which says it's a whitewashing of the ISI. The other is...
Yes, that's what...
the other is Shubhra Gupta, who says, no, it's quite obvious. So I said to Shubhra, see, Shubhra, we're all of the same generation. We were there. So when we watch the series, we know that, this means ISI, this means... But I said, what does a generation that knows nothing about this event, how do they process it? And if the suggestion is that this was an Al-Qaeda plot, Al-Qaeda has done horrific things, but this was a Pakistan ISI plot. This was a plot to get Masood Azhar free. The singular aim of the hijacking was to get Masood Azhar back so that Jaish-e-Mohammed could then inflict the kind of wounds it has on India since then.
And it is not just India. Zargar, Daniel Pearl.
Omar Sheikh. Yeah.
Daniel Pearl.
Yeah. And the fact that the world sat and
of
watched...
course, later, an American, these people played a very critical role.
That's what I'm saying, that the Americans didn't intervene when they could have. Actually, when they should process it in terms of what happened to Daniel Pearl, and that is what happens, right? Like, things do come back to bite you in a globalized age. You can't disassociate and say, this is not my problem, which is pretty much what the world did when this hijacking happened. But yes, in the context of the series, perhaps its name could have been, I don't know, the hijacking. And it could have had some, but when it's specifically about this, it has to be, it's fair for people who lived it to expect historical accuracy in it.
See, that's what I'm saying. What are you encashing here? Through entertainment, it is commercial. You are encashing the reality of it.
Yeah. But then what's the answer?
So
is the answer government summoning
wasn't it the
movie
onus on the
makers?
people, as you earlier had said,
Yes.
about the names?
Yeah. I believe
because some people are saying ki...
I don't know, I'm told
naam se kya
in the
matlab?
last 2 episodes the names are referred to. Are they? I have not seen the series, so I don't know.
No, I have not seen it either.
So I don't know. But I support the adding of the disclaimer. The disclaimer that has now been added.
Netflix has put it.
I support that. I think that if you are... If this is the representation of one of the deepest scars on the body politic of India in recent memory, it deserves to be accurate. It deserves to not let the ISI and the deep state of Pakistan not off the hook. My only dilemma is, why we did not memorialize and publicize and share information on this already, so that we wouldn't have to depend on a fictionalized series for our understanding.
We are very bad at chronicling what
That's
we do.
the point.
But I'll ask one short question here. Isn't it also what is happening, this criticism and this Hindu-Musliman, it also depicts a trait in our society now of having set of people who are permanently offended.
Yeah, that's the point. And firstly, this is not a Hindu-Muslim debate. Okay, I think
No, it is being made.
No, I think that is silly. And I think that the people who made it a Hindu-Muslim debate,
नहीं राइट लेफ्ट हुआ पहले फिर उसके बाद हिंदू मुस्लिम.
this is the India-Pakistan debate. It's very important to remember that the objection is not कि ये Hindu नाम है. The objection है कि it is not made clear कि ये Pakistanis हैं. ये कहना बहुत जरूरी है.
That's what the silence is about actually.
That is what is very important to say. But yes, I do believe that the answer to a not so satisfactory movie is a better movie. The answer to a bad book is a better
चार
book.
मूवी बन चुकी हैं.
Really?
Interestingly,
Really?
that they came and went.
Right.
Nobody realized.
So why is that, you think?
I think the times we live in.
Yeah, maybe.
I think the times we live in, I think at times it can even happen how movies are made nowadays that you deliberately do a few things
To provoke
to
an
address,
argument.
to actually get those people who are permanently offended to start talking about it.
Yeah.
And then
So that's the point, right? There are very solid grounds to ask more of this series. But the moment it becomes either Hindu, Muslim, right, left, government, BJP, Congress, then people lose interest in that. They're like, oh, this is just politics. The point is, we have to come back to the fact that this was a seminal moment in the contemporary history of India. A tragic and yet important moment. And it deserves to be chronicled with accuracy and sensitivity. And there needs to be a more important debate around why do we not know the answer to so many things? Okay, I understand the Official Secrets Act, but it's been 2 decades now. 2 decades? 25
no, the world
years.
over. The trend is 25 years.
25 years? Surely we need to have a chronicle of what happened, what was done, what was said, what was not said, and why.
And things which happened out in the open. It is not a proxy war led from somewhere.
It happened in full gaze of the world.
Public gaze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the questions remain, and the series doesn't. The only good thing the series has done is to make us have a conversation about a subject that nobody even talks about.
Or maybe, perhaps also the question is not being asked that why we don't look into what happened properly and why we don't put it in public space.
Absolutely. And please let us also remember that Masood Azhar is still there.
Yeah.
Inflicting terrorism.
Body blows, yes.
Yeah.
On the country.
Yeah.
If it was today, I ask you that if you had managed to get onto the plane, what would have been like?
I mean, my only interest would have been to again, like what are we as journalists? As journalists, if we are lucky, we are able to chronicle a moment in history as it unfolds. To the best accuracy possible, to the best sensitivity possible, without compromising anything operationally or our nation's or our country's interests. My only interest would have been to chronicle that moment. I have no other skin in the game, no other agenda. As an Indian, I would have totally gone along with not just what needed to be said, but what needed to not be said. I understand that these are national security issues. But if I were on that plane today, I think there would have been, maybe one would have known what was Jaswant Singh thinking. What were, for example, today we know that there was a fear that even after the passengers had been released, the hijackers had left a bomb on the plane. There was a red bag that everybody was looking for. What was this red bag? Was there a bomb? Was it diffused? Was it never found? But we know a little more.
What happened? Actually, IC814 story after the passengers took off.
What happened after that?
Nobody knows.
What happened? I asked Mr. Dutt. I said, when Mr. Doval came back, when Mr. Vivek Karju came back, when Anand Arni came back, did you all not meet again? Did you talk? What did you say in that meeting? Nobody says anything. I understand why they don't. No disrespect. They're all people I respect highly. They're all aces of their game. But as a chronicler and as a citizen, I think at some point we need to know the story more fully.
I don't know. Perhaps, we dismantled Vikrant, our first aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
And sometime in 2013, we dismantled the aircraft which used to be IC814.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Both are not around.
I don't agree with that.
These are stories to be told.
Absolutely. You don't dismantle, you chronicle, you hold it. There are painful moments in every country's history. You do not deal with the pain by pretending it didn't happen.
Didn't happen. You don't wipe off
No.
the traces of it.
No.
Pleasure to speak to you, Barkha.
Thank you, Rahul. Good to
very
see you
much.
after so long.
It's wonderful.
Wonderful
Thank you.
to see you. Thanks.